Yep, we're recording. Go.
So thank you everyone for joining us for Proposal Writing 101. We are excited to provide this opportunity for you and to have outstanding faculty joining us this evening. Before we really dive into the proposal writing and the things we have prepared for you, we want to introduce ourselves. My name is Ayli, and I am a second-year counseling psychology doctoral student at the University of North Dakota. And I am the student committee research chair. So this is one of the initiatives that we really wanted to start as a committee with under the leadership of Dessa. And I'll have her introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Dessa Daniel. I am a grad student at University of New Mexico in counselor education, and I am the Division 45 student representative.
And the two faculty that are also helping us with the discussion tonight. The first one, I'll be kind of giving a brief introduction. Dr. Awad is an associate professor and program chair of the Human Development, Culture, and Learning Sciences program in the Department of Educational Psychology. She has a faculty appointment in the counseling psychology program as well. She also started at the University of Texas at Austin since 2007 and advises several doctoral, master's, and undergraduate students. Her scholarship is characterized by three areas of inquiry, which are prejudice and discrimination, identity and acculturation, and more recently, body image and women of color. And she has a primary focus on Arab and Middle Eastern Americans and African Americans. And the other faculty joining us tonight is Dr. Cokley. He's a fellow of the UT System Academy of Distinguished Teachers. He's also director of the Institute for Urban Policy Research and Analysis, and a professor of educational psychology and African American diaspora studies. His research interests and teaching can be broadly categorized in the area of African American psychology. So Dessa, do you want to move forward with the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Awesome. So just a quick reminder, kind of like Dessa already mentioned this, but and I think she already muted you, so we took care of that in regards to any background noise. But we're really encouraging all of you to please stop for questions. We want to make sure that this webinar is as interactive as possible because this is for you. We want to make sure those questions are getting answered, and then Dessa and I will be reading them as the webinar progresses. So tonight, we will be exploring some tips and best practices on how to organize, write, and submit a proposal to a conference. And also as conference organizers, Dr. Cokley and Dr. Awad will also be kind of giving us a brief introduction to what the Division 45 conference thing will be, as well as some other things that they have prepared for us tonight. And last but not least, we're also going to take a look at the most effective ways to follow up on proposals where the answer is yes or no. So without further ado, let's get started. So we want to go back one slide. Okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I am very happy to be able to speak to you for a few minutes about the proposal writing process for submitting to academic conferences. If we were face to face, if I could see you in a room, I would ask you to to raise your hands to indicate if you've ever submitted to a conference before. But since we can't really do that.
You can do that. Put a thumbs up emoji in the group chat.
Oh, we can do that?
Yeah.
Oh.
This is the...
I'm old school. This is
21st century.
All right, well, let's do that. Using a thumbs up emoji, how many of you have actually submitted abstracts to an academic conference before?
Or yes,
or
there's not emojis.
Okay. All right. So we see that a few of you have. Excellent. So some of this will sound familiar to you, and for others of you, it perhaps will be new information. So one important logistical issue to be aware of is that for the Division 45 conference, the proposal is very succinct. You have to you have to be able to say effectively what you want to submit in 200 words. And one of the general rules about submitting to conferences is take the guidelines very seriously. We get typically, a lot of submissions, and when you have a guideline that gives you a word limit, don't take that for granted. Although it is unlikely to happen, there have been instances where proposals have been disqualified because of not going by the guidelines. So 200 word limit, which means you don't have a lot of space to communicate effectively what you want to submit.
Well, and partially what will happen anyway is that most of the software that's used for proposal submission has limits put in place that will block it from being actually submitted. So that kind of helps you stay, below that word limit.
Okay. So one of the first things that you want to convey is to explain why your paper, why your research is an important scholarly contribution. That probably seems like common sense, but you would be surprised at how many times individuals will submit a proposal and you can read it and you still come away not being very clear about why this is an important scholarly contribution. The point of submitting a proposal to present is really to help move the discussion forward in whatever particular area you are interested in. You should be able to explain why your research has broad significance to larger debates in the field, and you should be able to convey that, again, succinctly in your proposal. If there are, important individual scholars, theories, debates, or whatever that are taking place in your area, you should make sure to try to briefly articulate that. And really think about this carefully. Is this submission really a contribution, or are you just trying to present something? So in other words, you don't want to just submit something just for the sake of submitting something. You have to really feel strongly that it is making a contribution and that it is advancing the conversation in the discipline. People who are reviewing proposals are usually pretty adept at being able to tell whether something has been really carefully thought out and is advancing the conversation versus something that is simply sort of put together very quickly, not well thought out, and not likely to advance the discussion. So that's I guess the first point that I would like to make. Secondly, you want to have a point and you want to articulate it clearly. Again, your goal in 200 words or less is to be understood by the people that you want to present to. You want to tell them exactly what you plan to present. In many instances, it will be data that you have collected, and perhaps you've done some analyses, some preliminary analyses, and you want to sort of convey that. In some instances, you haven't collected the data, but you anticipate collecting the data and having it ready to present at the conference. At either case, you need to convey that, and you need to articulate it very clearly and tell them how the data that you have or the data that you will have, what is its significance, what is it communicating. You want to know the literature. And, typically there will be some citations, and again, we're talking about 200 words or less, so, you don't have a lot of room, but you want to convey in your proposal that you have done an ample or an adequate sort of review of the literature. If someone is reading your proposal and they don't have a good sense of what bodies of literature have been consulted, you have not done a good job of conveying it. It may be the case that you review the literature, but you haven't really effectively conveyed that in your proposal. Know the literature, know what the issues are, know, if possible, what is the gap that you're trying to fill, or what is the issue that you're trying to address? Why has it not been effectively addressed in the literature, or I guess better stated, has it been effectively addressed? If it has been, then you probably don't need to write the proposal. So more than likely, you see some reason why it hasn't been, and then you are trying to propose how your research is being additive or contributing to the literature.
And I mean, and I do want to caution, do not waste your 200 words on a string of citations. I mean, so I do think that's important. You don't have a lot of space. So my suggestion for you, and especially in this Division 45 proposal, is that you sort of state that, this is, if, for example, you have a sentence that says, this is a common finding or is well established or whatever, it's really good to use the e.g. parentheses, C, blah, 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 whoever, Cokley et al. And then you can go forward. And so it is really important to state, what your proposal is doing, what you set out, how does it contribute in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah. If I could back up just for a moment, I mean, there was one thing that I probably should have started off with, or near the beginning, and that is the title of your proposal. It is very helpful to have a very descriptive title. Now, again, we're talking about word limits, and so you're not going to, in most instances, what is it, 10 words?
Usually 10 words.
So you have 10 words in which to write a very catchy, descriptive title. But titles are important. They're important, when you're looking through conference programs, they're the first things that catch your attention. You see titles, and then if the title is sufficiently interesting, then you are more likely to read what the research is about. So have a descriptive title when you are putting together your proposal. Another basic thing, and as graduate students, you should already be familiar with this, but you really don't want to have mistakes in your proposal. Proofread. Now, we're not perfect. We all make mistakes, and having one or two typos, won't automatically bar you from having your proposal submitted. But believe me when I tell you that if you submit a proposal that has multiple, sort of editorial mistakes, that does not convey, I think, a good message about sort of your attention to detail. You also want to make sure that beyond sort of proofreading, beyond sort of, whether you are, writing things correctly, having words spelled correctly, et cetera, you want to make sure that what you're saying also makes sense, that your sentences clearly convey the ideas that you're trying to convey. So it's always helpful to have someone else read your, and this is not just relevant for submitting a proposal, it's relevant for anything that you write, your theses, dissertations, manuscripts that you submit for publications. It's always good to have someone else read what you have written, because sometimes what you think you have communicated may not be what you're actually communicating, or it perhaps could be communicated more effectively. So proofread, and have other people read what you have been working on.
So I see a question about where people can find the Division 45 conference guidelines. We're actually in the process of revising them, and so they'll probably be up in the next week and a half to 2 weeks. And so our conference conference program chairs this year are Dr. Enrique Neblet and Dr. Robin Gobin. And so they are in the process of getting that all squared away. If you have seen the previous guidelines, they'll probably be very similar. But we also want to make sure that we give them the chance to revise the call for proposals as they see fit. We'll probably extend the deadline to the end of February for submissions, so worry not, you'll have plenty of time to submit. We can actually get into the specifics of the 45 conference, for sure more during this webinar. But if you have any specific questions about this conference, obviously, please feel free to type them in, and we'll be happy to answer those.
If I could make one other suggestion for your proposals, there are ways that you can set your proposal apart, from a good proposal to a great proposal. And as I was preparing for this webinar, I was reading several sources, and I came across a really good piece of advice that I wanted to share with you. So when you are writing a proposal, it's one thing to say something along the lines of, in this research, I will argue this, or I will present this. I mean, so that's one way of doing it, which is, and it's a pretty common way. But if you want to set yourself apart, you might say something like, based on this extensive review of the literature, based on collection of data, based on essentially communicating the work that you have already done, based on this work that I have done, I will argue that, or I will show that this data will indicate that. So you want to really sort of convey to the reviewers that you're not just sort of submitting something that has not gone through a significant amount of work on your part, so that by the time you are writing it, you can confidently convey that you have done some research, you have reviewed the literature very thoroughly, and what you are proposing to present is something that has been vetted by yourself, and something that you are very qualified to present on. And so I think being able to convey that again in your proposal will make it a great proposal, as opposed to just sort of a good proposal, which is what you see regularly. And so again, you want your proposal to stand out from others. Yeah. So those are some of the basics that I can think of. I've written a number of proposals during the course of my almost 20-year career, and I think the ones that I have felt the best about have been the ones that I've eventually gone on to publish. Now there are some exceptions, but this is just sort of a piece of professional development advice. If you're putting all this effort into writing a conference proposal and presenting at a conference, we would hope that you would not let that effort stay as a presentation, but that you would eventually turn it into a publication. And that's just a good piece of professional development advice for all of you.
Well, and it's actually usually the expectation, especially at the Division 45 research conference, is that this research will end up being, this is like a preview for what's going to be in the literature. And so that's why people go to to conferences in the first place, right? They want a preview of what people are working on, because the publication process is so long and arduous, and it takes so long to actually see things in print. It's kind of exciting to see what people are working on. And so it is, I would say, the typical expectation for a research proposal that it would eventually turn into a publication if, obviously, if it's rigorous enough.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So well, I will turn it over to our lovely hosts. about the next. So I see it's quantitative versus qualitative. Is that correct? Did you want us to move on to that?
Just very quickly, do any of the participants have any questions before we kind of shift gears a little bit?
I'm like waiting with bated breath to see.
Somebody does.
Desa, are you going to type it, or are you going to?
We were expecting a question to be.
Sorry, I was going to type it. Dr. Awad was calling me out. So for the Division 45 conference, can you talk to us about like the conference programming? So will there be posters and like roundtables and panels, or is there like something students can start working on for like kind of knowing like, oh, I should submit for a poster, or I can get me and some of my colleagues together and we can do a panel?
That is a fantastic question, future Dr. Desa Daniel. So we have symposia, which consists of 3 to 4 talks that you could put together that have some sort of unifying theme. Again, it is 200 words, and also, you know, there's going to be sections for the specific papers as well as an overarching abstract with that. There's also interactive discussions, which essentially in that particular format, typically 2 presenters will open a discussion on a topic with brief remarks, and then facilitate an interactive dialogue with the audience. There are also 15-minute paper presentations. So this is for those of you who have an amazing piece of work you want to submit and present, but you can't find other people to do a symposium. This is a chance to submit a 15-minute paper presentation, and then essentially what will happen, if it is accepted, it will be put together with other papers. Sometimes the theme is very clear, sometimes it's just not. But there's usually some sort of commonality. I guess I should also mention I was the program co-chair for the 2016 Division 45 conference. So I myself read 248 proposals. So there was certainly a lot of variability in topics, and so I have a lot of experience reading these. And then there's poster presentations. And so this is the type of format that we tend to see most often with graduate students in terms of submitting. And again, you would submit a 200-word abstract, and during the conference there will be typically two poster sessions that do not have any competing programming. And so the great thing about the Division 45 research conference is that so on Friday there will be a poster session, and on Saturday of the conference there will be a poster session, and everybody at the conference at that time typically walks through those poster sessions. And so you have scholars from the field coming and talking to you and asking you questions, and so it's really great and interactive, and a chance to have you know, the big names in the field stopping by and reading your poster and asking you questions. So that's probably one of my favorite things about the Division 45 conference, is that it's really intimate. And so you have a whole bunch of people who are interested in ethnic minority research. And I know that there will be questions about the theme of the conference. The thing about the Division 45 Research Conference is that the theme is ethnic minority psychology research. There is not, we don't want to limit it with the theme, because we want you to feel free that if you have any kind of research that's relating to ethnic minority graduate students and early career professionals, as well, actually, and any professionals to help develop their skills further. And so we're going to have that will be announced a little bit later once we get that squared away. The other theme of the pre-conference, because we are in the capital of Texas, we are going to have a policy themed pre-conference as well. And that, and I can let Kevin talk a little bit about some of the exciting.
Yeah. So one of the roles that I have at the University of Texas is being the director of the Institute for Urban Policy Research and Analysis. The Institute is one of the sponsors for the conference. We've contributed both financially as well as sort of in-kind contributions to the work of our staff. And as Dr. Awad has said, we're also located in the capital, so it made sense to us that part of the conference, and certainly the pre-conference, address in some way policy issues. And so the idea that we had was to feature psychologists of color who work in the area of public policy, or whose work has public policy implications. So for example, the keynote speaker, I guess it's
the last thing I heard was when you were talking about being in the Capitol and doing research on
Oh wow, so that was a whole section that you...
Oh wow, we
Okay, go ahead, say it again.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So so did you hear the part about me being the director of a policy institute?
Yes.
Okay, and being in the Capitol. And so we've been invited as a plenary speaker, Dr. Lonnie Snowden, who is a professor at the University of California at Berkeley. Dr. Snowden has dedicated much of his career to public policy work. And, as psychologists in training, we don't often, I think, take the time to really think how our work can be applied to affect and impact and inform public policies. And again, given that I direct the Policy Institute and I'm a psychologist, I thought that this would be a great way to feature psychologists of color who engage in this type of work. So Dr. Snowden is one of the plenary speakers, for the pre-conference. We're very excited to have him. We'll also have other psychologists of color when the conference itself starts, who will also be featured in their public policy work as well. Okay. Anything else you want to add? Should we move on to the quantitative?
So we had one more question from Molly. She said, if we submit a paper presentation, but it does not get accepted, will we be considered for a poster presentation instead?
That is a great question. And Molly, thank you so much for asking it. That reminds me, actually, we can put it right into the proposal. Since I'm actually sending all that information to our proposal builder right now, I will put that into our proposal information, where there will be a question about, if this does not get accepted in this format, would you consider alternative formats? So if you check that box, then we would consider you in another format that would have more space. So may be a poster session, and maybe we can ask a follow-up question to make sure that that's actually one of the options. So we'll have some sort of question in there so that you will still have a chance to submit if, for example, we don't have spaces for paper. So, yes, great question.
Awesome. So now I think we can move on to the next one.
Okay. You want to start off with this?
So quantitative versus qualitative proposals.
Well, let us ask this question. I mean, it's interesting that this is a specific slide. So, Desa, maybe you or someone can answer this. Is there a question about whether the the conference has a preference for quantitative versus qualitative proposals. I guess what we're asking is what is it that you want to?
Where's the verses coming?
Yeah, versus what is that about?
So I would say not just if the conference has a preference, but you talked about proposal writing and the importance of keeping it nice and precise in the 200 words. But when you're doing qualitative versus quantitative, is there any difference in the proposal?
I mean, you have to be probably pretty talented in reducing qualitative proposal. So you really can't have a long quote. What I would suggest for a qualitative proposal, for example, so even in quantitative, you're not going to have a table or results section. You might mention or highlight one of your best or most intriguing results, right? And you might say it was statistically significant, blah, 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 and that's all you have, right? But in a qualitative proposal, I would actually, if you decide to use a quote, it should be like a part of a quote in 4 words that highlight maybe like the person's own words in 1 line, but that you actually just talk about unifying themes in a couple of sentences and try to reduce what the themes are, because you're not going to be able to actually present or write about data that in terms of quotes. And so I would stick to very brief themes, and also make sure, because it's brief, that you communicate why it's significant, right? So I would spend a little time maybe giving some information about the actual results, and more time talking about the significance of what the results are and how it will be discussed further, during your presentation. And so that's always, I think, important to state when you feel like you don't have enough space for it, that you remind the proposal reader, that the abstract reader, that this is a very brief version, and then you will articulate. You want to give them enough good stuff that they want to see it at the conference, right? That is your goal.
And so something that stood out that you talked a lot about was how to convey your result in such a small amount of text. What I'm wondering is if you review any and if you take any conceptual pieces.
If we review,
are you asking, would we consider proposals that are just essentially a conceptual paper, not a quantitative or qualitative based research, but rather a conceptual paper?
Yeah, so either a conceptual paper or perhaps like a student who is in the proposal process of their dissertation. So they they don't really have any data yet, but they have an idea and they just want to get some feedback on it.
I think we've seen that in previous conferences?
We have, I mean, in the past, we have, trying to think, last conference, there were some papers that were sort of like that. So there were some instances in which people submitted saying that they would have data by the time the conference happened, and it didn't happen. And then they contacted me because they were panicked because what they were going to present did not actually have data. Because it is true that we do highly encourage proposals that have some sort of data or a plan for data to be collected before the conference comes on July 19th. Okay. But if you propose data and you haven't collected it, it's best to turn it into, if you can, a conceptual proposal that has found something significant. Does that make sense? So it isn't enough to just do a literature review and say, I want to present this literature review. It needs to be a literature review that actually makes connections and contributes something different, or shows us that, or really, presents the ideas in a way that really hasn't been looked at in the literature. And and it's a difficult task, certainly, but that's really what we're looking for in terms of the proposal process. Otherwise, you know, having some pilot data is always helpful. So if you can get some data, any data, it's not, you don't have to have 700 participants for this proposal, but if you have anything that can give us some window into what it may look like with sort of an adequate sample size for quantitative study, and for qualitative, if you know, finish all your interviews or focus groups or whatever it is that you're doing. So it's good to have some, if you can have some kind of data, those are going to be stronger proposals and would be considered, sorry, that's my daughter's hand, would be considered, I think, before, you know, just conceptual or pieces with no data.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think that, you know, if you absolutely cannot have any data, you know, that, you know, if you're in a situation where it's just going to be impossible, I would, you know, still encourage you to submit. But, you know, even if you have, you know, modest data, you know, if you're doing a quantitative study and you know you have numbers that would not be that you would not be able to publish, that's okay. You have, it's some data, and having some data generally is better than having no data. But again, if you are in a situation where you just, you know, you can't have any data, and you know you're not going to be able to have it until a certain time, you know, communicate that in your proposal, and you can talk about sort of what you anticipate finding, what you're planning to do with the data. So that would be okay.
I mean, I think a good rule of thumb is try to submit something that you could potentially publish. So if you have a conceptual paper that's publishable, that's a conceptual paper that's really going to contribute something new to literature, right? So something that you can potentially publish. That's why conferences are a great avenue for you to get feedback on like early stages of work in which you have something to present on. So that would be my piece of advice.
But I will add this though, not, you know, not to be sort of a what is it, a Debbie Downer, but but conceptual papers are incredibly difficult to publish, even for seasoned professionals.
Right.
So just keep that in mind. Yeah. Yeah, it is they're very difficult to publish. Okay. Did you have any other questions, or were there any other questions about quantitative versus qualitative proposals?
So there's one question about, do you suggest for me to emphasize how my research aligns with the objective of the conference? In the chat box, I just reminded people that there is no conference theme, but they really should align their research with the overall mission of Division 45.
Absolutely. That is a great answer.
Okay.
I mean, I'll tell you some examples of conference proposals that did not get accepted. How about that? I can't help in this way. Someone wanted to present a proposal that talked about how it's really white men that are discriminated against, and that this whole notion that people of color have a unique experience in the United States isn't true, and that they were creating a scale to look at how the extent to which white men were oppressed in the United States. And so, as you could probably would expect, that proposal did not get high ratings. It did not get accepted to the conference. So that's an obvious example of not in line with the themes of Division 45.
Okay. So you just said about the ratings. So when people are reviewing the proposals, is it a blind review? And what they should expect in any feedback for if they didn't get accepted?
So I will say this, do not expect feedback. It's a lot of proposals and it's really difficult. So what ends up happening with that feedback box, it's usually to the program co-chairs. and also to us, so that we know why something hasn't been accepted. If we end up getting questions, then we can go into it, and if it's appropriate, we then end up giving feedback to the person who asks for it. But typically, because there's so many, we just can't give feedback to all, individualized feedback to all participants. But one of the things that I do want to suggest to all of you that are on this webinars, I would consider submitting your names to be reviewers for the conference. I mean, obviously you would not get your own submission to review. That would be cheating. But you will get the experience of seeing what other people are submitting, and so that you have an idea of the sort of things that get submitted, and things that, and how they're, rated. And so typically reviewers get between 8 to 10 proposals to review. And so that's also usually a fantastic way to see what people are writing, and get practice, critiquing work. And so, yes, doctoral students can serve as reviewers. We had them in the past. And so we tend to have what I've done in the past, and I'm going to leave this up to Enrique and Robin, is that I've usually had one student reviewer with a professional reviewer on each proposal. And I think that that would be a really great experience to get. We will have a call for reviewers. That's actually probably going to go out this week by Enrique and Robin. So you will be able to submit your names, and then you will, as soon as we have the proposal portal set up, you will be invited to sign in, and you'll have instructions on how to do that. So.
Awesome. So along those lines, when it's time for students to follow through or hear around the time of if they will get their proposals or not, should they follow up with the conference people, or should they not?
I'm sorry, could you
Daisy,
repeat that
could
question?
you repeat that once more, please?
Yes. So when it's time for the announcements to go out about if proposals were accepted or not, should they follow up in a few weeks after submitting their proposal, or should they wait to hear from the conference coordinators?
I would say to wait. Being in that position of being a program chair, it was a lot of emails of very anxious folks wanting to hear back. And I didn't mind getting emails about when they would hear back, but that's fine. But usually it'll be about a month. The problem is that the process includes so many different people, so we usually await reviewers to complete their reviews. So if you do sign on to be a reviewer, please complete your reviews in a timely fashion, because people are waiting on their decisions. And so oftentimes, if reviewers have not completed their reviews, we'd have to go back out and look for other reviewers. And so that sometimes prolongs the process. But if you feel like it's been if it's been more than a month or a month and a half, I would send an email. I think that's fine. Right. And so there's a question about undergraduates being able to review. Right now, it's actually only open to graduate students and professionals.
Everyone is on mute.
They are always on mute.
Oh,
they've been on mute the whole time.
Oh, okay.
Are there any questions for us that have not been? Daisy, are you talking? Because you're muted. Okay.
That's what I was saying.
I know. I don't think
it looks like we're going to move into questions and answers. So if anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself, as I should have done, or you can type them into the chat box. I'm not sure if Ayli has any questions for you, but I was also wondering, for the Division 45 conference, why why do you think that this is a conference for students to attend over other conferences?
If this is if you are doing research on ethnic minority populations, this is the conference. It is absolutely focused on the research. And so in its, we try to invite cutting edge people to do the plenaries. And also the other thing is that people who've come to this conference in the past, they know that part of it is the professional development, especially of graduate students. And so they enjoy seeing graduate students and talking to them about their work. And so I would have loved to have had this conference as a graduate student. And I went to a lot of conferences, and I have to say that, just the level of rigor of the work that's presented, as well as the supportive environment by people that I would have considered my idols in graduate school. I think it's just a lovely balance of that.
Yeah, I will add that there are several conferences that focus on issues of sort of multiculturalism, diversity, race, and culture. You're probably familiar with them, and they're all very fine conferences. When we attended the Division 45 conference for the very first time, we were really struck by the passion that people have for doing research on ethnic minority issues. This conference is different than some of the other conferences that deal with sort of multicultural issues, in that it really is about the research. It's not about sort of the application. It's not about sort of therapy or clinical work, and that's fine. And there are, and if that's sort of your passion, there are venues that are more appropriate for that. But this conference really focuses on the science, on the research. And when you are in that space, you are surrounded by like-minded people who are equally as passionate and enthusiastic about research on ethnic minority issues. And so if that's something that sounds appealing to you, this is the conference to attend.
Well, and the other thing is that this is the only conference that is focused on ethnic minority psychology. So even with intersectional topics, for example, there's still the core of it is ethnic minority psychology. And so I think that's important to know, because, you have great conferences like the Multicultural Summit, but there's actually 4 different divisions. And so the topics are definitely a lot more diverse in terms of content area. And you have other conferences that focus on social justice, but that not necessarily just on ethnic minority populations. And so I think that the unique, because it's so unique and such a great time to, again, see the cutting edge research and get feedback from the big names in the field, I think Division 45 is truly unique.
Thank you. And then I think Denise had a question, so I'm going to unmute her. Denise, did you have a question?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have questions?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
So as an undergraduate student, I collaborated with doctoral students and professors, and my proposal did not get accepted for APA. So I want to know if there's anything that I can do now to improve my writing for future proposals.
So, I mean, the good news is that we have a lot more room than APA. So if you didn't get it accepted there, submit it here.
Okay.
And, obviously, see what, if you did get any feedback, you probably didn't, because again, they have the same problem that we do. But this is, I think that because we are not competing with any other divisions, this is just our conference here, we actually have space. And so you probably have a better shot submitting it. I would have somebody else read it over and, ask the question, what information do you think is missing? Do you think we made a compelling enough argument? But I think the best thing to do is just have someone else just take a few minutes to read it. I believe the Division 45 APA program was a 300 word abstract. I don't know if I don't remember now.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So I would obviously reduce it for this conference and submit it.
Okay,
And again, click the box to have it, presented as a poster if the paper doesn't get accepted. I think that that's a good thing to do. But I also, and it won't take away from your chances to get it accepted as, for example, a 15-minute proposal. Symposium, also you can submit as a symposium if you have multiple papers under a unifying theme. So,
Thank you.
So one question, not necessarily related to proposals, but do you have any advice for students who are coming to the Division 45 conference and maybe it's their first conference, like some professional tips or tricks, or how to approach famous people like you and talk to you?
oh, that's hilarious. So I say this to my graduate students here all the time. You're only a graduate student or undergraduate once. You really have pretty much license to go up to anybody and introduce yourself, because people get flattered. They like to talk to students. And also it's, there's really nothing you can do that could really embarrass yourself as a graduate student, because you have so much flexibility. And I'll give you an example. I was absolutely enamored with the work of Dr. Bill Cross, and I went up to him cheesing and I probably would still do this probably a month ago, but as a graduate student, it wasn't creepy and he didn't want to take out a restraining order on me. But I went up to him and I introduced myself and told him I admire his work, and he took the time and talked to me, and I felt like he was flattered, and then he saw me at conferences from then on, and came up and actually, asked me how I was doing. So as a student, you really have, this great opportunity to go and talk to professionals, because they really enjoy talking to students.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely true. I spend a considerable amount of my time at conferences talking with students, and I consider that a responsibility that I have and that other professionals have, and I take it very seriously. So Dr. Awad is absolutely right. I mean, you should take advantage of your student status.
It's a benefit. It's a benefit, because once you become a professional, it gets a little weird. You have to have something substantive to say as a professional, right? But as a student, you can be like, I love your work. You're so amazing. Oh my goodness. And everyone's like, oh, that's so sweet. But if I went and said that, they would take a restraining order out on me. So,
Any other questions? Oh, okay. So I am working with Ayli on this presentation. She's fantastic. She is the research chair for the Division 45 Student Committee. We are students ourselves, her and I. I am the Division 45 student representative. We will be taking new applications for those positions starting in May. And we will be recruiting for students who are hoping to help out and be a part of the Division 45 Student Committee conference as well. So you can email me. I put my email here in the box if you have questions about that. We are also all located on the website. So that's division45.org. So you can find us there as well. So there are thousands and thousands of student opportunities. And Ayli and I cannot do them all. So we are always looking for students who are motivated to help out and to just get involved. So if you are going to Division 45 conference, we need students there. If you're going to APA, I will be there as well in San Francisco. So we need students there as well. So
yep, and I will be in San Francisco as well.
Awesome.
Are there any other questions?
So very quickly, I also want to say that we also take undergrad students. So if you're just wondering, we also allow undergrad students on our committee as chairs. So please do that as well. Okay. So Ayli, I guess we'll close it out if we're done, unless the famous Cokley and Awad would like to say something else.
I guess in terms of parting words, I would encourage you all to submit proposals, um, even if you are not confident that it will be accepted, and you never know unless you try. But please submit your proposals. I mean, just make sure that they are well written. But you should, because it is a good experience to submit. It certainly is a very good experience to have it accepted and to actually be able to present at an academic conference. But this is all a part of the professional development process that you're going through. This conference is, as we've sort of, I think you can hear from our enthusiasm, a conference that we feel very strongly about. We are very enthusiastic about it. It is part of the legacy of Dr. Robert Sellers, who, when he was Division 45 president, as a part of his presidential initiative, created the conference, and it was his hope that that Division 45 would really see it as the place to go to present research on ethnic minority issues. And so that can't happen if we don't have people, submitting, students and professionals alike. So we really encourage you to submit your proposals, and we really look forward to hopefully seeing you at the conference.
Yeah, come to Austin. It's fun here. It's gonna be hot, but it's fun. So thank you for having us. This is
Of
really
course. Great. So Ayli, if you want to close us out with what's next and then your final information.
Yes, so please submit a Division 45 conference proposal. Regardless of the outcome too, we strongly encourage you to be able to just attend and participate, network. There's a lot of power in that. And also share this webinar with some of your colleagues. I know sometimes time zones and things like that make it difficult for everybody to be able to attend. Not only that, but because this has been recorded, we'll be sending out an email with access to the recording, and along with that, we'll be sending some additional resources related to conference writing in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that. And this webinar series is something we really like to continue doing. So if there are any specific topics that are related to research that you really would like to see, please feel free to email me, and also stay tuned for a survey that we'll be kind of sending out for those who participated to see how we can improve how we serve our students. We really take a large part of Division 45, and it's really important to make sure that we are giving you the tools that you need in your professional development.
Awesome. Thank you so much,